When it opened on Broadway in 1996, Rent was hailed by critics as daring and exhilarating. Beloved by a devoted, ever-growing fan base, the show spoke powerfully to the spirit of its moment and went on to become one of the most popular, successful, and influential musicals of all time. Rent won 4 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, and was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. It ran on Broadway for more than 12 years. When it closed in 2008, it had played more than 5,000 performances, making it the 7th longest-running show in Broadway history at the time. In the last 25 years, it has toured the U.S. and Canada multiple times, been produced in 50 countries, and translated to 25 languages. In 2005, a feature film adaptation starring members of the original Broadway cast was released by Sony Pictures, and a live televised version aired in 2019. Rent was written by Jonathan Larson, a tireless, ambitious composer and lyricist determined to bring something new to the evolution of musical theater, and who tragically did not live to see the massive impact of the show he had poured himself into for years. He died suddenly at 35 from an aortic aneurysm just hours after the final dress rehearsal for the off-Broadway production of Rent. Larson grew up listening to folk music, opera, and musical theater. He also loved artists like Billy Joel, Elton John, The Beatles, The Who, Prince, and Kurt Cobain. He attended Adelphi University with plans to focus on acting, but gravitated toward writing, which would become his focus for the rest of his life. After college, Larson moved to Manhattan, where he lived in a shabby 5th-floor walk-up on the edges of the West Village in Soho. He worked part-time at the Moondance Diner for more than 9 years to support himself while he wrote musicals. This time in Larson's life, and his work on Superbia, an unproduced futuristic musical inspired by the novel 1984, is depicted in Tick, Tick, Boom, a musical adapted from Larson's one-man show, a film version of which was released in 2021. Larson had a vision for what a modern musical could be. He wanted to bridge the gap between musical theater and contemporary popular music, to write shows reverent to the traditions of musical theater, but also politically engaged, and that could bring together the visceral ethos of rock with the lyrical focus on storytelling that's vital to the theater. He was known to earnestly tell new acquaintances that he was the future of the American musical. Larson was influenced by shows like Hair and Jesus Christ Superstar, as well as the work of Stephen Sondheim, but what he envisioned hadn't been done in years. Mega musical spectacle dominated, and although there were shows that used rock and pop music being produced, they stemmed from concept albums by popular musicians or borrowed from other periods. Larson believed it was time for a change, for a musical to speak to and in the musical language of his generation. Rent takes place in Alphabet City, a part of New York's East Village. When Larson was writing in the 80s and 90s, New York was in the midst of multiple crises. Economic decline in the 70s had caused decreased commerce and cuts in public services, leaving many neighborhoods in disrepair. Amid financial difficulties, buildings were foreclosed on and abandoned. The city saw increases in homelessness and drug use, and some of the highest crime rates in its history. The AIDS crisis was tearing through the city, devastating communities. While the East Village was struggling at this time, it was also home to a vibrant community of progressive artists and activists. It was central in the fight to preserve affordable housing and the locus of movement of squatters who sought to reclaim and rehabilitate their neighborhoods. Visual artists contributed socially engaged, politically charged work to these causes and community interest groups. Downtown Manhattan was the birthplace of AIDS activist organizations like ACT UP and a hub for offbeat creative communities, performance artists like those who inspired the number Over the Moon, punk and grunge musicians like Roger, and a dynamic, burgeoning drag scene. Larson was writing in response to the world around him, capturing a generation living through difficult times in a community surrounded by strife, but who found joy, hope, and love amid fear and pain.